Hello, welcome. I'm Dave McElwee. Thanks for taking the time to watch this presentation, which supports the release of my novel, My Accidental Investigation. I hope you enjoy the show. I'm here to guide you on a fun behind the scenes look at my recent accomplishment of becoming a certified delusionotist. And once finished with that balderdash, we'll shift gears and review something a little more tangible, my novel, My Accidental Investigation. All right, ready to suspend reality for a wee bit? This is The Delusionotist, a tale of omission. During the presentation for my afterlife, I coyly referred to myself as a delusionotist in training. I define delusionotist as someone with the ability to blend fact with fiction and fabricate a story, leaving others to wonder which was which. I acknowledge coining the seemingly misspelled word as a device to explain my writing approach. So, by having this fun, I thought nothing more of my mischief. However, everything changed after that day. Now, I expect skepticism when hearing what I say next, but remember, life is stranger than fiction. The following morning, I heard a knock on the front door. When I opened it, there stood a distinguished looking couple dressed in colonial era garb holding this scroll. They introduced themselves as Oscar and Olivia, claiming to be representatives of the Royal Society of Delusionotists. Olivia unrolled a scroll and read, "We, the Royal Society, confer upon David McElwee the title of Certified Delusionotist. With this honor, you are granted all the rights and privileges offered by our esteemed organization." I was handed the scroll and thought, someone's playing a practical joke, so I went along with it and asked, "How did you determine my certification?" The couple locked their eyes upon mine, and Oscar said, as though a matter of fact, "Our decision was based upon your life's body of work, culminating with your blog titled The Delusionotist. When you credited the very real Polly Pry as coining the word to describe snake oil salesmen, it drew our attention." Olivia then spoke. "Quite frankly, we were thrilled in hearing the word's usage, having thought our time for public recognition had long since passed in 1755. After a thoughtful pause, she continued, "We were intrigued with how you chose the word, which is the cherry on top reason for your certification. To quote Sidney Johnson, our grand delusionotist, this is exactly what you'd expect from a real delusionotist. Please inform David he'll be expected to share his origin story at his certification ceremony." Upon hearing this, my curiosity grew, wondering how far my friends would take their charade. So I asked quizzically, "Certification ceremony?" Olivia replied, "Yes, as is customary for newly certified delusionotists, you'll be assigned a task to promote our place in modern society. This will be fully explained tomorrow. Please be prepared for a 5 a.m. pickup for transport to the Great Hall. Lift your worries and chills. All the arrangements have been made." I opened the scroll, and this was printed on it. I stared at the cube, and then it shifted, and when I looked up, Oscar and Olivia were gone. The following morning, I went outside at 5, and as promised, the couple arrived riding a bicycle built for three. I was complimented for my punctuality and then asked to join them on the empty middle seat. To be completely honest, once we started pedaling, I lost track of time and awareness of the surroundings. When we arrived, I was whisked off to a tailor's parlor and fitted for clothing for a portrait now hung alongside my peers in the great hall. The ceremony was magnificent, the food spectacular, and the speakers elegant. And just when warm chocolate chip cookies were served, I was called to the podium to explain my usage of Delusionotist. When addressing the audience, something kicked in, and I went on a loquacious stream of consciousness run of words, of which I can't repeat, ending with me saying, and that's how I conceived the word delusionotist. I was honored by the applause that followed. I was then joined by Sidney Johnson, who addressed the assemblage to close the event. It is then I learned my fate when he concluded by saying, Delusionotist McElwee, your certification mission is to elevate our society's recognition by convincing a lexicographer to include the word delusionotist as a proper dictionary entry. His declaration caused the membership to stand and applaud wildly. I was handed my diploma, whereupon the crowd dispersed. And looking around, I saw Oscar and Olivia beckoning me to follow. In doing so, I passed the table I just sat and grabbed a still warm chocolate chip cookie. Once outside, we mounted the bicycle built for three, and the next thing you know, I'm home. In parting, Olivia handed me this portrait removed from the bicycle's book bag and said, Be well, David, you have work to do. In looking at the portrait, I was befuddled by the dates on the badge that read 4/5/1859 through 2/29/1956. And like you, I noted that 2/29/1956 was a leap year. In that moment, I felt I fell through a schism and now caught in a cosmic riddle. But when I looked up from the portrait to ask questions, Oscar and Olivia were gone once again. Since then, I've had no contact from the society and expect none until completing my assignment. I'm anxious to ask questions, thus my motivation for the last 2.5 years. Given your intrigue about my curious situation, I'd like to share my pitch when I get an audience with a lexicographer in hopes of solving this mystery. If you happen to know one, please contact me at davidmcElwee.com. To prepare for meeting a lexicographer, I figured a little research necessary to appear legitimate in my role to petition Delusionotist for dictionary inclusion. So during an intense 26-minute web search, I discovered Samuel Johnson and his seminal dictionary published in 1755. He was a man of great professional accomplishment, making lasting contributions as a poet, playwright, essayist, literary critic, biographer, and lexicographer. And in fact, he's recognized as a role model for every lexicographer that's followed. And as incredulous as what I say next may sound, twin brother to none other than Sidney Johnson, the very man responsible for assigning me the task of getting Delusionotist as a dictionary entry. Records confirm Sidney was equally brilliant as his brother, but lackadaisical and a bit of a rogue. He preferred to use his intellectual abilities doing what he called tinkering with variables and telling outlandish stories to those like-minded he caroused with well after midnight. His group of merrymakers were known across the land as delusionotists and closely affiliated with other tricksters such as hypnotists, magicians, mentalists, and illusionists, also given to folly after midnight. Samuel, angered by his brother's shenanigans, decided to play a practical joke on Sidney by misspelling delusionotist when published in his landmark dictionary. Given the public's adoration for his remarkable work, Samuel was unable to correct the spelling error as intended, fearing his audience would lose confidence in his literary ability. So, in a clear case of sibling rivalry, this clerical oversight has persisted for nearly 300 years. I realize that's a lot of history to overcome, but I have a plan to motivate the lexicographer. As I see it, my mission is twofold. First, produce evidence that delusionotist is again publicly recognized, and secondly, capitalize on the sibling rivalry omission angle. So here's my approach. During my research, I learned that lexicographers are a little tricky in pinning them down on exactly how a word becomes dictionary worthy. So I figured it best to adhere to standards Johnson used when compiling his 1755 masterpiece on which to build my evidence. Sam kept it simple, saying a word must have a specific meaning, widespread usage, staying power, be in print media, and oddly enough, a PowerPoint presentation. Let's see if these standards are met. When meeting with the lexicographer, I'll start with a little chit chat, then shift to the moment Delusionotist was officially reintroduced publicly in its remarkable journey since. Here's what happened. My wife and I were about to go touring when a much anticipated delivery of my Afterlife books arrived. We wanted to get on the road, so we put the box in the car. Of course, we looked at them first. Any discerning lexicographer would note that missing detail, which would certainly destroy my credibility. In our travels, we stopped at the Golden Nugget Antique Market in Lambertville, New Jersey. During casual conversation with a few merchants, they discovered my writing hobby and the arrival of the books. We were invited to hang around and try to sell a few. I went to the car to retrieve the box, and when I returned, our new friends had set up a table for my use. I did sell books that day and took this as a sign from Oscar and Olivia that I was on the right path. However, to avoid the lexicographer in thinking me as daft or delusional, I'll make no reference to them nor the Royal Society during my pitch. In continuing, I'll assure the lexicographer that each piece of evidence that follows is verifiable. I'll begin with the most compelling evidence, that of appearances at public libraries across our great nation. Remember, libraries are community pillars and unsung heroes. Libraries provide exercise for the brain and an array of resources which strengthens your community's fabric. So, if you get an opportunity, help where you can. I want to thank the following for allowing me in the door. The Bradford Area Public Library, established in 1879. The Hamlin Memorial Library in Smethport, established in 1892. The Mount Jewett Memorial Library, established in 1909. There's an asterisk, there's a story. The Friends Memorial Public Library in Kane, established in 1912. And the S.W. Smith Memorial Library in Port Allegany, established in 1930. Thanks, friends. With this strong opening, the lexicographer's interest certainly will be piqued. Then I'll continue with additional evidence that simply can't be ignored, most of which I'll spare you today. I'll begin with sharing a smattering of print media such as newspaper articles, press releases, promotional flyers, and the two novels. To demonstrate a social media presence, I'll search The Delusionotist by David McElwee on the World Wide Web, then hand my phone to the lexicographer for their review. I'll review my publisher's media campaign, including video book trailers, a podcast, and a Zoom interview. Then I'll suggest we look at a few YouTube presentations and mention it as my understanding a Wikipedia page is under construction. We'll finish our social media expedition by reviewing my author's website, which documents additional information. Then I'll shift gears and report being welcomed by service groups such as the American Legion, the Lions Club, and Rotaries. I'll report on speaking engagements, including the Alaska Veterans and Pioneer Home, a women's literacy club, and a little free library. Hello, Elizabethtown. And I'll share pictures from cultural events, including a county fair, a Swedish festival, and an arts festival. To demonstrate word spread, I'll review sightings of books reported from across the USA and mention international sightings in Argentina, Jamaica, and Mexico. I'll end the evidence phase with a sampling of memorabilia surfacing since reintroducing Delusionotist to society, including a Smethportopoly game board based on my afterlife, bookmarkers, t-shirts, and posters. I'll show a character drawn by the famous artist Eric Jones. And as you know, art only goes up in value. In ending, we'll listen to two songs, My Afterlife and Certified Delusionotist, which I can share after this presentation. After presenting this overwhelming evidence, I'll tell the story of sibling rivalry. When I'm finished, I'll take a dramatic pause, then slide a manila envelope across the table. After the lexicographer reviews the documents within, which substantiates my story, I'll hand them a signed confidentiality agreement claiming no credit for their discovery. Then I'll suggest they hold a press conference to announce their discovery and credit the brilliant Samuel Johnson for masterminding the longest practical joke in lexicology history. This, of course, will tie them forever to their mentor and propel Delusionotist to its rightful place within the pages of a beautifully bound dictionary. In departing, I'll share with the lexicographer our secret handshake and wish them well with their upcoming success. Pretty good plan, right? For the curious, here's our secret handshake. Cube, cube, shift. The inspirations in the shift. Never could have I imagined answering a delusionotist in search of a lexicographer when asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up, Davy?" Thanks for the fun. Well, let's move to something a little more tangible, my accidental investigation. Early on during my hobby, an inquiry was made about my writing process. I was stymied by the question and muttered something incoherent. So, to avoid incoherency for the second time in life, I've decided to address that question today. This is me at my office. I dressed like this most days when writing my accidental investigation. On my table, you'll find a Bluetooth speaker shaped like a rock, colored pens, notebooks, a laptop, and yard work tools. I like to write a little and work a little. For me, physical activity is a great way to break through writing snags. I spent about 365 days preparing my accidental investigations manuscript. By the way, if you're wondering what I did in the winter, I used a shovel, the same as you. I wrote the new book to prove to myself the first one wasn't a fluke, and perhaps a bit encouraged by the fun that followed. I appreciate. To continue our exploration, I'd like to share some of what I've learned since writing became a hobby. I write thoughts, not sentences. I write random thoughts when developing a scene. In those good moments, I go on a tangential roll in which multiple ideas become enmeshed within the short passage. When separating these fragments, it makes me wonder, what was I thinking? Resulting from this ponderance, a fuller picture is revealed, which of course compels me to write another passage of loose associations to ponder and expand. Do this a couple times and you're done. Discovering to draw timelines was a critical lesson learned when writing my afterlife. Thus, I was mindful of this when writing my accidental investigation, which started as an independent work. However, when Dr. Stimps, who we'll discuss soon, showed up, the book turned into a sequel. This forced me to draw another set of timelines to create continuity between the two stories. Expect changes. I learned to be flexible in letting good ideas flow and take the lead. When I force the agenda, it seems to stifle creativity. When stuck, move on. I grab a weed whacker and cogitate or shift to another task such as correcting spelling errors. Checking errors forces me to read, which in turn sparks story ideas, which of course are written as thoughts and not sentences. Separate the wheat from the chaff. Remove irrelevant material. I find it's hard to do because I wrote it, but necessary, especially during early story development. Purging helps me focus on what's next. Pull a Mary Poppins. When not motivated, think well begun, half done. This compels me to do something like open a laptop and let it stare at me. Don't be shy to explore. I find taboo subjects aren't easy to write about given my angelic disposition, but when forced by my fingers to do so, I hold on tight. To me, writing is like sanding a fuzzy puzzle, which means continually reading and refining with the understanding I'm only finished once, and probably not long. Here's a storyline for my accidental investigation. Beware, don't judge a book by its cover. My accidental investigation is a magical realism novel influenced by the field of psychology. The emotionally tense story is tempered with humor to reduce the sting when realizing life is fraught with unseen dangers. What does a serial predator whose camouflage is that of a devout funeral home director, a traumatized postal worker with a penchant for writing notes, and a 12-year-old girl with Down syndrome have in common? The answer is Dr. Stimps, a well respected psychologist facing her mortality while embarking on a profound journey triggered by a seemingly innocent question. Do you want lifesavers from your guardian angel? This question links her with characters from my first novel, My Afterlife. The unconventional group collaborates to end the Predator's 26-year reign. Their journey is best summarized by Dr. Stimps. Life is complex, with many vagaries, eddies, side trails, offshoots, and hidden passages. We are always converging. Occasionally, a common thread somehow weaves its way through a seemingly random group of people to create a shared convergence. What a great one it was. The following are challenges I called my mountains when writing the book. Clinical complexities. Another person's mind is a private place, thus my goal is to take the reader inside each character's inner world to discover what shaped their behavior. As a psychologically based book, I wanted to represent clinical diagnosis with authenticity, so the mountain was to present Vernon's perverse delusions, Charles's post-traumatic stress, and Jane's intellectual disability accurately using few technical terms. Sensitive subject matter. Death images, child victimization, and distorting religious themes are socially sensitive topics. When writing about these matters, I was mindful to ensure they necessary for the purpose of storytelling. My goal wasn't to glorify evil nor offend readers. I believe good always wins. After about 64 pages of this difficult content, I was compelled to find the fun in the story, which meant connecting with old friends from my afterlife. One important connection was the greatest high school heavyweight wrestling match in Pennsylvania history. Another is the emergence of a character that reshaped the novel. Introducing Dr. Stimps. Her role was intended as a minor appearance. However, in that time, she was elevated to the book's narrator. Everything written to that point had to be reworked. One such impact was to structure my accidental investigations chapters to coincide with Dr. Stimps's weekly lecture during her final semester. During these lectures, she presents Vernon, Charles, and Jane's clinical cases to graduate students using her landmark workbook titled The Therapist's Diary, From Intake to Termination. This meant creating a diary outline as well. On the upside, Dr. Stimps's skills as a psychologist came in handy when I had to explain difficult matters. Given her failing health, I had to be mindful to describe those changes as the semester progressed as well. But the most difficult challenge was synchronizing timelines and storylines when converging my accidental investigation with characters from my afterlife. The yard looked good after that. Hey, let's take a closer look at the characters from my accidental investigation. Introducing Dr. Stimps. Dr. Stimps guides us on her last clinical journey. As a driven professional, she's dedicated her life to work, leaving no room for personal relationships. I think you'd agree that when dying, emotional Novocaine is more important than a morphine drip. Hopefully, Dr. Stimps finds her Novocaine. August 23rd, 2003. Introducing Dr. Stimps. Metastasized is a vile word. Once learned, never forgotten. It always provokes curiosity when heard for the first time. Metastasize projects a single feeling and a universal truth invoking hopelessness. It's cold-hearted when ruthlessly invading the body. Metastasize is undefeated despite medicine's good fight and an untold number of prayers. We quickly learn to avoid talking about prognosis unless, of course, if asked by one hearing the word for the first time. When queried, we use the phrase, their cancer has metastasized, which prompts the attentive listener, unfamiliar with the crunchy, jagged, and sharp-sounding word, to ask, what does that mean? Metastasize is not a versatile word. Its 4 syllables form a hard, harsh, and hurtful reality that looms and lingers. Its mission is specific and discreet, devouring the body. Metastasize is a word somehow perfect for its intended purpose, having found its niche. Cancer sucks. With great sensitivity, we tactfully explain the dire nature of another circumstance. which always ends with their death. We hesitate to answer the question, how long? The answer, of course, is vague because cancer is a voracious monster and metastasize, its evil best friend, determines that. The pair show their full personality when reading their impact from a blue-inked laboratory report comprised of technical jargon and mysterious numbers, all meant to summarize one's delicate condition. Dreary pieces of data, the calm psychologist ponders in reading her clear clinical summary, treatment options, and prognosis. A second reading reveals nothing new, only reinforcing distinct from words such as aggressive, palliative, and terminal. Meet Vernon Clark, an evil human. How does an ordinary boy from a good family evolve into a ritualized child predator? Certainly menacing thoughts must have lurked within, waiting for a reason to escape. This is Vernon Clark, a master of fake feelings. Vernon Clark was born in 1956, a few years after the APGAR score was a universally accepted tool to measure the health of a newborn. He scored an 8, indicating his birth health as average. Vernon epitomizes the bloated middle of the bell curve on measures used to evaluate human characteristics, meaning he is neither bright nor dull, neither athletic nor awkward, neither this nor that. He is thin, but not a standard deviation from the belly of the bell curve. Vernon is everything average to the naked eye. However, he does have a data outlier often overlooked other than by hindsight. Vernon lacks feelings towards others. He has no genetic disorder, no traumatic brain injury, no family violence, and a life experience right in the middle of the same bell curve. So, in summary, average on the outside, but not so on the inside, as he has a broken cord, disconnecting him emotionally from others. Here's Charles Timmons, the unfortunate victim. Charles is denied the opportunity to smile. He was taken away by a black cloud that has followed him since he was 3. It makes him vulnerable. Ask Vernon Clark. 1966. The man lies in the green casket. His hands are crossed at his waist, and his red tie is flat, covering the buttons of his new yellow dress shirt. His black suit is unrumpled, and his shoes would shine if they are not within the closed portion of the casket. The grieving wife clutches their toddler, acutely aware this will be the last time they'll see the man they both love. The bereaved woman cringes, cries, and tightens her arms around the boy upon hearing the top half of the casket click as the sealing key turns. Now 11, Charles' memory is sketchy about attending his father's funeral, who was killed in an unfortunate logging accident. While cutting a maple tree, it unexpectedly twists and bounces off a neighboring maple, which altered its trajectory and the lives of the Timmons family when it hit the forest floor. Despite a valiant attempt to escape, Bill is recovered by a local forestry crew who hoped they were on a rescue mission. However, this was not to be the case. After several minutes of cutting and clearing branches, they find Bill, crushed, skewered, and unrecognizable beneath the sprawling widowmaker. They say in the moments before one dies, there's clarity and a burst of energy. This seems to be true in Bill's case. After being staked to the ground, he had enough life to retrieve a picture from his wallet. When found, his bloody hands clutched a photo of his family taken Saturday at the arcade. The 3 foresters who recovered the dead man would cry that night when alone, imagining the last words Bill Timmons had with his wife and son. Say hello to Jane Larkin, the fun. Now you understand why I needed to find the fun. And it started with a heavyweight wrestling match pitting a gator versus a hubber. The match is a catalyst for a girl born years later named Jane Larkin. She's a spark that ignites the accidental investigation when asked an innocent question. Do you want lifesavers from your guardian angel? Here's a little from the match. The usually punctual Larry Larkin arrives late for the team's pre-meet activities. He's confused watching his biology teacher, Mr. Hanley, lead passengers from the Gators bus into the gym. Larry approaches the teacher and instructs him to go inside, then adds teasingly, "That's if you can handle walking among a congregation of Gators." Just as Larry is going to reply, he steps on the back of varsity cheerleader Tina Towner's new white sneakers. Witnessing the shoe removal, Hanley sniffs, alerting his inner Ozfox. With his wheels spinning, he instructs Larry to help the shoeless girl to the bleacher so she doesn't get her sock dirty. Taken off balance by Hanley's instructions, the couple comply and thank him for his help. Apologetically, Larry assists the now hopping cheerleader over to the bleachers. Something about the younger boy's sincerity captures Tina's attention, prompting her to retie her other sneaker as well. Hanley watches as the soon-to-be promoted heavyweight and the petite varsity cheerleader continues to talk despite two sneakers being tied. The biologist knows the dance of romance, but is a little surprised by the odd pair's mutual display. He then reminds himself that teenage chemicals lack predictability, hiding covert mysteries which science studies and songwriters have yet to fully document. Intrigued by the pair's dancing, Hanley drifts closer just in case he can tinker. Focused on coupling, he is startled when janitor Waco taps him on the arm, reporting the locker rooms will be available in 5 minutes. With this knowledge, Hanley yells, "Heads up, kids! Everybody meet me at center court. I have an announcement to make." Hanley smiles and watches to see if Larry takes his shot. Larry freezes, hearing Hanley's announcement. He's unsure what to do next, but forces himself to speak. He stammers something unintelligible, followed by a pink glow on his cheeks. Both Tina and Hanley react to his mumblings as though Larry had invented a new language. Hanley rises up on his toes, wondering if the verbal blunder will disrupt nature's dance. Both he and Larry breathe a sigh of relief when Tina inquires, "Did you ask for my phone number?" Larry says yes, and Hanley nods slightly and whispers, "Ah, the beauty." Now in panic mode, Larry turns to the biology teacher and asks, "Mr. Hanley, do you have paper and a pen?" And at that moment, Hanley tinkers with the variables. "Sorry, no paper. Have her write it on your arm. That's a number you don't want to lose. Use this." Whereupon he hands the boy a black permanent marker. Hanley smiles, then leaves, walking toward the center of the gym. The junior varsity heavyweight with minimal wrestling talent hands the marker to the cheerleader. He then pulls his sweatshirt sleeve above his elbow, exposing his right forearm. Tina writes 7 numbers each an inch high on Larry's forearm. As a part, she says, "Look for me tonight during your big match." Then, this scene is from a few years later when the Larkins are now owners of the Arch General Store and parents to Jane. Under the auspice of restocking Deaver's fly display, he and Hanley frequent the Arch often. It is not unusual they extend their visit by drinking coffee and sharing a Pop-Tart, and true to his nature, Hanley banters with every customer who enters. Those unaware of his shenanigans assume he works at the store, and some ask for help. When this occurs, he assists the customer, but leaves the transaction piece to Tina. During Hanley's clerking duties, Deaver sits with Jane in the consignment room, where she occupies her time drawing with crayons. After serving 3 customers and drinking a second cup of coffee, the fly fishermen are about to leave when Jane hands her drawing to Deaver. The men inspect it, wondering what the 4 lines mean. So Hanley asks, "Jane, tell me about the picture." Jane excitedly answers, but is unclear until Deaver says flatly, "It's us. Look." Jane shouts yes, pointing at each line, then their clothing. The green line is Deaver, the blue Hanley, the half orange, half black her mother, and the pink and white herself. Jane smiles broadly and says, "Yes, Deaver," making sure she overpronounces the R. "What's the drawing's name?" Hanley asks. "Pop-Tart," Jane replies happily. Hanley gets permission from the girl to write the picture's name and date on its back. He asks Jane to copy his letters, claiming it's an artist's technique. Once a teacher, always a teacher. At that moment, a simple drawing transforms into a lifelong method for Jane to remember significant events with impeccable detail. Going forward, drawings deemed important are put in protective sleeves kept chronologically in 3-ring binders. The Larkins call the collection Handmade Memories. This is Joan Klausner, our accidental investigator. By way of curious circumstances, Joan leads the accidental investigation. She was featured in my afterlife as a big city reporter who covered Smethport's sesquicentennial in 2003, only to discover her biological roots in doing so. Joan's passage is about resolving her identity conflict. As she dreams, Joan's eyes flutter with the intensity of a hummingbird energized by a pot of strong coffee. Her breathing is deep, intense, and erratic, much like when making love or witnessing an horrific event. Despite rapid eye movement, Joan experiences no images, only an electrical surge, causing her body to convulse like a grand mal seizure. She is verbal and conducts a call and response with herself at various ages, reminiscent of a Baptist revival. Suddenly, an intense flash burns away the darkness. Joan sees herself sitting at a children's school desk staring at a huge movie screen. She hears the movement of the mechanism and the rustling of the heavy fabric. Suddenly, the image of a pea pod and the words nature and nurture, 2 peas, 1 pod, begin strobing on the movie screen. Then darkness returns and all is quiet. Joan sits up, feeling pangs from a distended bladder while struggling to retain the memory of the fantastic dream. She is disoriented regarding time, date, or circumstance. Her eyes are wide, fixed, and unblinking. She appears like someone who's just awakened from a concussion, droopy. Slowly, her thoughts clear, and she thinks, what should I wear, a blazer or a ball cap? Joan then experiences a rush, bringing clarity that she's now both the blazer and ball cap. She's the 2 peas in 1 pod. Feeling complete, Joan pulls the yellow comforter around her neck, unable to stop the flow of warm urine. It's like rebirth. Joan's investigation is conclusive, but lacks one critical element: evidence. We know the importance of evidence, so our quirky friends from my afterlife decided to help. Here's their plan to stop Vernon Clark. December 22nd, 2003. Plates break. After Porridge parks at the funeral home, none other than Hanley and Deaver approach from down the street. The ever-curious Hanley pulls over, telling Deaver he needs to secure the mound of Christmas presents in the back of the Jeep. Aware of their annual mission, but in a hurry, Porridge walks to them and says, our friend Mayor Plates has passed. I must go now. Job well done, men. The Santa Claus fly fisherman, not wearing a stitch of red, departs, stunned by the unexpected news. Deaver notes Hanley is quiet in driving the side roads, back roads, and dirt roads, delivering anonymous presents to families having a challenging year. The last delivery is a red envelope, which they tape to a stick and place on a stack of wood gathered earlier by a family unable to afford fuel oil. The cash was donated by businesses that sell Deaver's hand-tied flies, to which he matches a total. Usually after finishing their deliveries, Hanley rambles nostalgically about the origins of the family fly fishing fund. But not today. There's no discussion about how he and Deaver started the fund to honor bicycle book bag champion Skeeter McGee. Suddenly, as though solving a complex problem, Hanley awakens, declaring, let's go get Beanie at his ice hole. We're going to the Junkman's. I have an idea. I know, Mr. Kringle, Deaver confirms, aware things are about to get interesting. Given Hanley's carefree driving style, Beanie feels seasick, bouncing about the back of the empty Jeep, preferring to be surrounded by the security of outdoor gear and textbooks. He knows his comfort will be restored soon, having participated in the annual Secret Santa project since its inception. When they arrive at the junk man, Beanie shakes and rolls his body once standing on the crunchy snow, then informs Hanley, you need to put all that S back in the Jeep. It rides poorly when empty. Moments later, the trio hears a slam from the outbuilding behind the junk man's workshop. To his surprise, there's no banter or BS coming from this seriously amped Hanley, who says, I have an idea. They enter the junk man's workshop and sit at the table while Hanley meticulously describes his plan, ending with, "And that's how we break open a casket." Deaver's the only one who doesn't flinch in seeing Nurse Florence's headlights shining through the window of the junk man's shop. To camouflage their covert operation, Hanley grabs a deck of worm playing cards and deals 5 to each man sitting at the table. Falling in line with staging a poker game, Beanie and the junk man spread washers, bolts, and nuts used for betting. Entering the shop, Nurse Florence is met with an over-exuberant greeting common when her lifelong friends are up to something. She remains coy, aware they always tip their hand when involved in shenanigans. Playing along, Nurse Florence then informs the pretend card players of the passing of Mayor plates. They collectively mumble they've heard the bad news. It is then their hand is tipped. Not a single poker player holds a card, prompting Nurse Florence to rapidly ask questions. Hanley, what's the value of the washers? Beanie, the bolts, and the junk man, the nuts. Stymied by her query, their babble is cut short when Nurse Florence turns to Deaver and says, "What's going on here?" "I suggest a go fish," Deaver answers in his unique way of admitting they've been caught again. So, that's a plan to get evidence. You're going to love how that turns out. So, what's next? I'm going to locate a lexicographer. I'm going to ponder the portrait nameplate. I'm going to write a book called and come back here. Thanks, friends. See you down the road. The shift is the inspiration. Thank you. For those inclined, please leave an Amazon review. It can be simple, something like, "From the mind of a certified delusionotist comes another surrealistic romp." 5 stars. Hey, thanks, everybody. See you next time.